That's my worry. If you go back in that way, it also if you think they convert another kind of look at another situation like like you talk to you convert another situation start another situation start and it takes the convert. No, very long. Yes, but no, I just swear on the no, Google myself.
Because you want body in that day, if you say we are not so our friends will not take you out of that energy. What I'm saying is that what I'm saying is that people can see this and so what do you consider? And so you do it. Okay, but I want to be smart. That's how you do it. Yeah, that's how you do it. The rest of them. Oh, what do you feel? Yeah, I was
Oh my God. Yeah,
I can't see. So what's the limit address?
Yeah. You know, but five, so that's
I got I've sent it, but I forgot to put the no, this is there. I forgot to put the title. Yes.
Just for the system.
conversation that yeah.
What?
You sent it.
Yeah, I've sent it.
Yes, yes. And there is I accept what else? I was wondering
Okay, you have 1 more minute before you can start.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Can we roll now? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We welcome you all for this panel. It's been a very intriguing one. We are fascinated to have this panel because we're trying to probe some issues which we think we can unravel some mysteries of what all of us believe or we can disbelieve in some aspects of it. Our panel is gender, pop culture, and the contestation of Africanness in indigenous films and performances. So what we're looking at is both film and live performances, okay? So the Africanness, we're looking at what makes it African. When you ask the film, what makes it, because we have these issues of African film or it's not African film, why do you call it African film, you know, and the roles of the female gender. That's where we bring in gender. What are their roles? What are they doing? Are they contesting, being directors or being producers and all those things? Why is it in the hands of maybe the male folks and not the female folks? So that is what we are trying to, look at. And we are happy that we have people who are here to also help us do some arguments and deliberate in this robust, so to speak, panel. Thank you. My colleague will continue. To start with, I am Kasmia Onyemuchara. And
Charles Okwolu, thank you very much for being part of this wonderful gathering. I will have about 5 presenters in our midst, but presently we've just been able to communicate with 3 of them. One is here physically present with us, and we'll be having 2 presenting virtually. Naturally, we'll give them 10 minutes to speak to their works, and then that will afford us ample opportunity to engage, their works. So in our midst, we have Omotala Okunlola, who will be presenting Beyond Female Body, Sexual Politics, and Embodied Resistance in African Feminist Imaginations. And thereafter, we'll be looking at a presentation by Osinachi, who will be joining us virtually. He will be looking at African cinema in the global context. He'll be, like I said, it's Kensile Osinachi Ezema who will be, interrogating this. And thereafter, we'll look at costume stereotypes in Nollywood films. A study of Long John, 2002, and also in London, 2003 by Grace John Obunnaya. So I want to invite us to engage the papers actively. Thank you. So, please, you can speak to your work. Yes, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming to this panel, amongst all the other panels that you could have attended. So the title of my presentation is Beyond the Female Body, Sexual Politics and Embodied Resistance in African Feminist Imaginations. And what I will be doing in this talk is basically to talk about different resistance strategies in women-led protests to illustrate examples of embodied resistance and basically emphasize that there is a need to imagine an anti-patriarchal world where sexual politics is not, relied on so heavily. I will begin my presentation by juxtaposing 2 women-led protests in Nigeria and use this to basically springboard my paper. And I should say that there are also more recent examples of the kind of things that I will be mentioning here today. I use this because they were a little bit popular. So on the 15th of January 2022, a group of women led by the Queen of Okakoko, a small town in Ondo State, Nigeria, staged a protest to condemn the incessant killings and insecurity that plagued their community. The immediate cause of the protest was the deadly armed robbery and ritual killings which had happened earlier that week. But a group of women staging a protest aimed at compelling an irresponsible government to action is not news. What became news and was indeed splashed all over Nigerian newspapers, and this is one example of that, was the women's state of undress during the protest. In a viral video, fully dressed women were seen, half-dressed women were seen holding hands in a circle, chanting songs and performing a call and response sequence led by the queen, who stood in the middle of the circle. Alongside the queen, aged women also stood in the circle, naked from the waist up, grabbing their breasts and using it as a point of reference while laying curses on the evildoers whose activities had turned their community on its head. Now to the second protest, which I believe a lot of people here would be more familiar with, and that's the NSAS protest between October 8 to 22 of 2020. Nigerians took to the streets in various cities to protest police brutality, especially those perpetrated by the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. The protest started with the hashtag NSAS on Twitter, but of course took a life of its own offline, with thousands organizing in major cities all over the world. Although the protest had no official leaders, the activities of the feminist organization FEMCO soon became evident as members served as coordinators, sending out information, organizing medical, legal, and financial resources that proved to be invaluable. The group had only been formed a few months before, but it displayed the kind of leadership that Nigerian feminist scholar Molara Ogundipe insists is important for any kind of African feminism. In her book, Recreating Ourselves, Ogundipe Leslie attempts to answer the question, what can feminism be in Africa? By noting that feminism in an African context means that women must be actively involved in the everyday business of social transformation in its entirety. While there were examples of sexual embodiment of resistance during the NSAS protest, it was neither prominent nor did it erode the media attention on the organizational work of FEMCO and the other protesters. Can you please go to the next slide? Yeah, and so during the protest, we had this kinds of placards and all of that, but it wasn't the focus of the protest. So the two protests I've mentioned are important because women were at the center of events, yet while one relied heavily on the use of the body, the other rallied little recourse to the woman's body. So against the backdrop of these two resistance strategies, I consider the implications of a continued reliance on embodied resistance by African women as a dominant feminist strategy. By embodied resistance, I refer to all acts of resistance in which the female body is conferred agentic powers through a cultural and social interpretation of its potency, thus turning the body to a fount of power from which feminist activism can be done. To be clear, embodied resistance scholars have acknowledged it as an age-long strategy against patriarchy, from Foucault to Julia Kristeva, Lucy Regari, Monique Britting. A lot has been said about the body as, in quotes, the site of production of new modes of subjectivity, and that's from Zeri, 1991. To quote Angela King in her essay, The Prisoner of Gender, Foucault and the Disciplining of the Female Body. The female body is, again, quote, a surface inscribed with culturally and historically specific practices and subjects to political and economic forces. Scholars have used terms such as female genital power, that's Laura Grillo, bottom power, Linda Day, and defiant disrobing, that's more recently from Naminata Diabate, to describe different aspects of bodily resistance. Because of my time, I will just skip through. And of course, we have in Nigeria more publicized protests like the Aba Women's War of 1929, Abeokuta Women's Union protests of the late 1940s, and different examples of such kinds of protests that are about the performance of the sacredness of women's nakedness in public spaces with the aim of creating spectacles that are geared towards, social transformation. My concern in this talk is to, however, complicate this normative reading of embodied resistance as liberating and feminist. I also consider the implications of continued reliance on women's sexual politics as a dominant anti-patriarchal strategy. In her book, Naked Agency, Naminata Diabate has begun such a work by calling attention to the blatant reductionism in media accounts of women's naked protests, such as the ones that I've mentioned above, emphasizing how the media barrels past the great organizational work done by these women. In the same vein, she interrogates the agency and power often ascribed to these actions, noting that they usually overlook or trivialize the desperation that is often the catalyst. The Abate uses the term defiant disrobing to raise vexed questions about agency, power, and interpretations of these actions from the multidimensional perspective of the women protesters, their targets, and those who witness these actions. She engages acts of insurrectional nakedness with some level of skepticism by acknowledging the interrelatedness of women's agency and vulnerability. And in a similar vein, Linda Day 2018 does the same thing in her interrogation of the term bottom power in the context of political activism. We'll just skip through all that. At the theoretical level, Indigenous theories of African feminism, like African womanism, femalism, motherism, are centered on the women's reproductive and nurturing capacities, such that she takes on the metaphor of the earth from which all of creation springs. And at the representational level, of course, Nigerian literature and film studies are replete with examples of bodily embodiment of resistance in the form of withholding of sex. And have examples like J.B. Clark's Wives Revolt, Julie Oko's Edewede, Omoni Oboli's Wives on Strike, which I will talk more about in this presentation. The woman's body in these instances become refashioned as both weapon and negotiation tool, such that they are at once helpless and powerful. And it's exactly this intersection of power and powerlessness that I use to complicate the idea of agency in feminist activism that uses the body as point zero. Specifically, I'm interested in what I have identified as meteoric power, which is solely dependent on the capacity to maintain the spectacle of bodily resistance. It is at the instance where the cultural knowledge aligns perfectly with women's agency that the power is at stake. But this power is fleeting and can only descend into a downward spiral from such heights. Yet one wonders why bodily resistance continues to be an important protest strategy for women. And I'll now turn to Omoni Oboli's 2016 film, Wives on Strike, to show the interrelatedness of vulnerability and agency, thus interrogating the potency of a feminist activity that uses the body as a starting point and only. So, in Wives on Strike, Amina, a young 12-year-old girl, is to be given out in marriage to an older man, for financial emancipation of her family. This decision is finalized without the consent of Amina's mother, Awa. Awa's friend Mama Ngozi persuades her own husband to interfere and speak with Amina's father, but he refuses, noting that it was not his business. Mama Ngozi, out of anger that night, refuses to have sex with her husband. Can you help me turn to the next one? That's the next one. Okay. Sorry for the dark picture. So in this scene, a sexual advance is revoked with a stern warning not to touch her. Mama Ngozi comments in pidgin English, or no cross here, I beg, stay in your lane, no cross here. She follows this up with paralanguage by turning her back to him while he lays down, staring in frustration. And then you can see in the other cut there is, lying down in frustration. She has her back turned to him, and we have in this one where she's like raising her hands in warning and basically saying, do not touch me. What starts as one woman's way of showing anger at her husband soon becomes a strategy in a nationwide protest when Hawa's other friends and neighbors get together to help save Amina from being a child bride. This film was made after the Nigerian Senate voted in favor of continuing child marriage in the country, a move that sparked debates about the rights of the girl child in Nigeria. And in a way, this buttresses the point of Susan Andrade in her book, The Nation Reads Small, African Fictions and Feminisms, where she argues that the fictional work of African women does not just portray the domestic space, but it uses this space to intervene in national issues. In Wives on Strike, Oboli employs the home front as a theater for national discourse by staging the public from the private. Before any meeting is called, in the movie and before the media attention on activities of the woman, Mama Ngozi's marital bed is the first battleground from which she adopts a sexual politics and protests her husband's indifference to the issue of child marriage. Other neighbors and friends soon adopt this strategy, and with media attention, women all over the nation also join, including the governor's wife. At the height of the protest, the women also stopped carrying out other responsibilities in their households, and the men's frustration and ineptitude in the film becomes comic relief for the audience. Paradoxically, the close relationship between this kind of female power and vulnerability becomes evident at this point. The women can do nothing other than wait for results, thus revealing their helplessness almost immediately after they have accessed the affordances of power that their bodies enabled. It takes the intervention of political heavyweights before the plight of the women is heard and something is done about their agitation. So, basically, what I'm trying to do. Yes, I know I know. I lost my line of thought. Yeah, is to think about different resistance strategies in women-led protest from real life situations and also from this film to investigate the fraught relationship between power and powerlessness, as well as agency and vulnerability. And basically, I'm arguing that although embodied resistance in its various manifestations continues to be an important tool of protest, it is also important to acknowledge its complications. I therefore emphasize the need to imagine an anti-patriarchal world that does not rely heavily on sexual politics. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That's a very wonderful presentation. I think that we have to just have all the presenters present, then we engage the papers. So I call on, if you're there, Osinachi, please, could you speak up and present your paper? You have 10 minutes. Osinachi, cheers, if you're there, please, you have the floor right now.
Oh, okay. And I want to start net also panel. Yeah, my affiliation, I'm a doctoral student of Diaspora and Transnational Studies, Institute of African Studies, and a doctoral fellow of the Third Fund Center of Excellence in Diaspora Studies. I don't know if I can be heard.
Very well, go ahead. Would you mind revealing yourself on video?
Okay, great. Okay. So just yeah, I am on actually. Is it
Volume. All right. Sudachi, seems like you're having a technical problem.
Are you there?
Are you there? Can you hear us? He's having a network problem. We proceed to Grace. All right. So please unmute yourself and continue. Could you unmute yourself and continue, Snachi? Can you hear us?
this must? Yes, I can
You tell him to cut the video. Okay, maybe you should consider cutting the video so that the bandwidth will increase. Take off the video, please. Okay, you may wish to carry on. Is the network from here or from there? From there. So please, Grace Obonna, if you are there, please, can we have you? Maybe later we take Osinachi. Grace Obonna, if you are there.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I'm here to present a topic, costume stereotypes in Nollywood films. A study of the character of Long John in Long John and Osofia in London. Talking about costume play vital roles in film productions. As such, through costume, the audience will understand what the film is all about. And therefore, costume can never be overemphasized when it comes to film productions. It makes it easier for the audience to understand the character that the person is portraying. The study interrogates costume stereotypes in Nollywood films using the character of Long John in Long John 2002 and the character of Osofia in Osofia in London. Nkem Owo played the two characters. Here, the theory is stereotype content model, which states that actors are stereotyped for the purpose of a given narrative. The synopsis. Looking at the synopsis of the film, when we talk about the Long John, this is a smart village young man, which has this busybody character. He's a drunkard who he's always quick to bombard people with his bad mouth. And therefore, everyone, and at every given time, he is ready to cast people anytime and any given time. Everyone in the village avoids him because of his troublemaking nature. Long John now gets hooked on a pretty city girl called Tochi and wore Tochi at the expense of his wife. While Osofia in London, hello?
We can hear you. Please continue.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. We can hear you.
While Osofia in London, Osofia decides to visit his brother in London. And a village man he exhibits his village behaviors. Even in London, even while a white woman is trying to help him out to find his way, Osofia was also exhibiting his village characters. And when we talk about costume stereotypes in these two films, costume stereotype in Nollywood films can be perceived from this Long John and Osofia in London. In these two films, Nkem Owo, who plays the two characters, wear the same suits, the same local suits with bead and shirts, the same color, the same suit, everything. And even in the first one, he did not tuck in his shirt. The same thing in the second one with local bead, red bead and hat. And this shirt, following the costume, when the audience are following this costume, the audience will think that it is the same film. That is the reason I said from the beginning that costume can make or mar a film production, in the sense that if it's not well presented, you can deceive your audience. The audience might be misled through the costume. Then in conclusion, this study finds out that there is stereotype in Nollywood, whereby the same costumes is being repeated every time in different films. Like this Osofia in London and Long John, the two films were produced in different years. This was produced in 2002, while the other one was produced in 2003. But the same costume was what Osofia was wearing in the two films. The study finds out that there is stereotype in Nollywood. And also there is positive and negative stereotyping, whereby positive is when a character maintains certain characteristics, like name in different films. While the negative one is whereby a character or group of characters dress in the same manner in different films. And these two films fall in the second category, whereby Osofia is wearing the same suit, the same t-shirt, the same cap, and in different films. And what this study is saying is that the filmmakers should try as much as possible to use professionals when it comes to costume. Professionals that will look at the narrative of the film and not going back to other films. What maybe in this film A character, a drunkard, is wearing his shirt and his trousers one folded. Then in the other film too, you say, okay, this is what this person is wearing. I think I can repeat it. But a professional in costume will look at the film narrative and know what he or she is supposed to be. It might be different from what the other person has done, but the person will still achieve a good result. The person will still achieve a good result when costuming the film. Also, repeating these costumes put the audience in the risk of not understanding what the film is talking about. For instance, in that two films, if somebody just wake up and see a film, after watching this one, they still put the other film, you find out that it's the same person, the same costume. There will be a mix-up somewhere. There will be a mix-up somewhere. So also, I'm not here.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
We can hear you, please. You can summarize. You can summarize, we can hear you. Please summarize, we can hear you.
Are you still there, please?
All right. We presume that she's almost done with her presentations. So please, let's call in Osinachi Ezema to finish up his presentation. Osinachi, if you're there, please come in. Osinachi Ezema, please come in. Osinachi, if you can hear us, please come in and finish your presentation. Maybe we continue to engage the papers that the presenters have already presented. The first presenter looked at the title, Beyond Female Body, Sexual Politics and Embodied Resistance in African Feminist Imagination. And of course, the presenter is Omotola. She presented physically. I think she interrogated the use of the female sexual power, where he talked. Osinachi, can you hear
Yes,
us?
I can hear you now. Yes.
All right, please continue. Just finish up your paper.
Okay. So I'm working on sorry for the network. The title of my paper is African Cinema Considered in a Global Context. African cinema considered in a global context. And the aim of my paper is to define and characterize African cinema. So the questions that have been agitating my mind regarding this topic are five. One, what is African cinema? The second one, what distinguishes African cinema from the rest of global cinematic cultures? Or is this distinction should constitute the minimal metrics for an African cinema? And then lastly, how has this minimal measures persisted through its evolutionary process? So this is a working paper, so I'm just going to share with you what I've done so far. And as a way of providing a background to the topic, I begin with the question, why, or is it even necessary to have a distinction between African cinema and the rest of global cinematic culture? Considering, of course, that the world has and is still turning global with supposedly diminishing borders and boundaries, and a world where essential identities are supposedly crashing and the universal human identity being uplifted or promoted. But this assumption presupposes the innocence and neutrality or objectivity of globalism, an idea which one may need to begin such an inquiry by dealing with a certain kind of characterization, global or globalist movement, especially since speaking of African cinema in a global context. Now, I've tried to characterize globalism in the context of I see globalism as manifesting or a manifestation of the contradictions defined in unity and threats. What are these unities? Unity of forms, unity of species, races, borders, boundaries, tongues, etc. But also, there is also a threat in this in called global, and the threat is capacity through homogenizations, eclipses, etc. Since globalization is not neutral, at least not by extension, not innocent. So the second way I tried to characterize globalism also connects to the sensibility of content. Globalism appears to be involved in a certain caste and all its borders, and so it shifts and sweeps unsuspecting people and cultures into that amnesia-like train. That, in fact, is through its evocation of contemporary as opposed to the memories of the past. But contemporary is only so to the extent that it reinvents the old and seeks. Am I on?
Very well. You continue, please.
Okay. Okay, great. So, and then I give an instance of this. Let's read out, sorry. It seems to me that in the course of mass devastation or devastating migration, cross-border migration from the early invasion and guerrillas, nearly all that was to distinguish his evolution into some kind of higher species of loss. So I suppose the human response to anything of his recovery to point him anew to the common goal of his
What do we do? Do we? Osinachi, if you can you hear us, please?
This is very funny from the end. So much. Okay,
yeah, please, just hold on a bit. Maybe the network will come up better as we progress. And as it stands now, I'd like the audience our participants to engage the papers, the presenters, Maybe I'll just do a quick summary, a quick recap of what the presenters tried to present. I was already doing that in the first presenter, who presented a paper on beyond female body, sexual politics, and embodied resistance in African feminist imaginations. And of course, the presenter did justice to the paper, and where she talked about various means, through which the female folk try to resist and try to negotiate power through sexuality. The only issue probably I would have pointed out, I would have wished to draw her attention to, whether she actually took cognizance of that, is Chinwezu's Anatomy of Female Power, which seems to be in the same trusts with the paper, where Chinwezu talks about the two hungers of men, the hunger of the stomach and the hunger of that below the stomach. Women uses those two hungers to negotiate power as it relates to men. And of course, the second presenter, Dr. Grace Ogbonna, looked at costume stereotypes in Nollywood films, study of Long John, 2002, and Sophia in London, 2003. Where she tries to look at costume, the stereotypical use of costume, as the implication of stereotypical use of costume in films, and calls for Nollywood costumiers to be more versatile in the use of costume so that they wouldn't produce cacophony of meanings. And then Osinachi Zema's presentation is highly truncated, but from the few we could make out, he tries to look at the necessity of mapping out a distinction or a distinct African cinema in the global context. Examining globalism in sense of homogeneity in various forms. And of course, I am trying to question the necessity of mapping out a distinct African cinema. But again, I'd like to draw his attention to issues of thought cinema, especially as propounded by Teshamel Gabriel and some other scholars. So, but I think with this, the floor is open for us to engage the presenters. Maybe as we engage them, the network will be clearer, and Osinachi will possibly finish up his presentation or make clearer his points.
Within the time frame.
Within the time frame too. So far we have barely 30 minutes to go. So the floor is open, please.
Questions, contributions, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Glass. Today I'm here because of the Brian event. Wanted to present the agenda to show that women are leading. Fortunately, I think it's not okay. So let me ask. That one that I'm talking about every time. Well, I'm not a film or film study of film.
Dr. Grace Ogbonna, can you hear us? If you can hear us, please signal. Let's know you're still there. She earlier excused herself that she had an emergency, that she had to present inside her vehicle. But if you are there, please signal, please. Dr. Grace Ogbonna, are you still there?
Yeah, I love to know because she talks about stereotype costume used in two movies, and I wanted to ask her if she interrogates the reason behind that, because it is the costumier that can actually tell us the reason why. That's my thinking. They can tell us why they have chosen to use one costume in one movie and repeat it in another. Perhaps there's a purpose for that. Because I wouldn't know whether she actually interrogated that before just going to conclusion to say that they have used the tool and the stereotype and all of them. And what is the implication economically, socially, and otherwise to the audience, to the users as well? Thank you.
Maybe I'm going to explain our mind because you have the. But I think that the two things, customers were different. When the same customer, if maybe the same customer handle the two things, it becomes maybe an easy thing to find out. Maybe why did you use the same costume you used last year and use it in this year? So you could now say, okay, maybe she might have a reason. But in this film now, the customers are two different persons. So it makes it look that this is real stereotype because you found out that, like she tried to say, that what Sophia wore in London, the long john, was something he's wearing also in Sophia in London. Maybe because that costume helped them to market the film. That costume made them sell more of the film. So it might be the reason why they have said, okay, let us still costume him in this. It could also give us, a clout to market our own film. But her own take now is that, why do you engage in this form of costuming? Why do you make him? Because he is like what they call a stock character. Because he's always a drunk every time he plays, 41 trouser and moving. So why do you want to make him look the same thing every day? And every other person who wants to play the role of a drunk is always trying to be like him, be in his, self, be yourself. So can't you have other ways of developing your own character? Why can't you develop your own costume? And must it be the same thing? That is what she's trying to interrogate. But she's pushing it now on the costumers. But I know I am not fully in film. He is in film. I'm in performance. Most times, some actors also force costumers on what they want to put on. It happens. They might say, this is what I want to use. And oftentimes you have paid the person. And if he says, I will use it, and he say, no, the film that could have ended maybe in 1 week could take 2 or 3 weeks while you're trying to convince him. So that's the problem. I wish she's here to also, throw more light on this, to have help.
Okay, please.
Thank you very much, sir. My question and observation is also on Dr. Grace John Bunaya. In addition to what he has rightly said, I was thinking if peradventure this actor was trying to use that costume to register his identity in the industry. For instance, in contemporary times, there are skit makers and some of these actors that you would always see them regularly on the same costume as a way of registering their personality.
Yes.
Right. Then, my worry again is the fact that she said costume stereotypes in Nollywood films. Right. So would it be that these costume stereotypes are still prevalent now between 2001, the two films she's on the study, and now? So if these stereotypes are still prevalent up until now, maybe she might need to add another study, maybe a film or 2 more films to place them side by side to justify that costume stereotypes are still prevalent.
Look at it from the angle of generations.
Yes. Generation. Thank you very much. Please.
My question goes to the positive. When we talk about power negotiation, I think there are several things involved. My question is that looking at the culture of nakedness, where At what point do we think there will not be any sense of queerness when women engage in the use of their body to negotiate power, especially in the case of protest and civil violence? Do you get
I'm assuming you're not using queerness in the LGBTQI sense. Yes, I got. Can I?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, well, your question is a really important one, and I guess it's something that did come, to my mind as I was thinking about this talk. I'm not sure that there would ever be a time where, women would not think about the body and, different manifestations of embodied resistance in, thinking about or trying to speak to power. I'm not sure that time will come, really. And for me, I do not even think that that's a problem, because it really is not. I don't think that it's a problem. Like I said in the presentation, it's in the African context, there is a whole lot of cultural history to to the idea of naked protest. It's cultural history, there's spiritual, it has spiritual implications and all of that for people who believe, it. Somebody like Naminata Diabete, who I cited, and who I who my work is in conversation with, would, basically say that, has a lot of skepticism about that she does not believe, that there's anything that is potent in a woman's body that makes it, a weapon, like that would make it carry out these things peacefully, right? But I believe in the potency of, say, the cultural aspect, the spiritual aspect. I think, yeah, these things happen. But I think my main argument is to say that when we talk about the potency, the importance, the power behind the naked protests, people tend to overlook all the other things that come together with this, with this power. They tend to overlook, for example, the organizational skills. Getting people to come together in a certain place to come protest out naked. There's been some level of organizational skills involved in that, but the spectacle of the bodies would make people just barrel past those and think only in terms of the nakedness and the body and all of that. But I'm also thinking in terms of when we say the power and all of that in this specific action, we also tend to overlook, in fact, the idea that power and powerlessness in this sense are very intertwined and interconnected. The vulnerability. I mean, at any stage of anyone's life, a woman coming out in a public space to be naked, any kind of nakedness, that's vulnerability right there. That's a high level of vulnerability. And so what I'm saying is we need to also always think about this high level of vulnerability that comes with this, what we think of as this power. And that's why I said it's like a meteoric power that when it gets to that height, they have done this thing, it's at that height, then it has nowhere to go than down, because now it's right there and it's been done. And then the next thing to do is wait and then, let these actions do something in the, let it actually do something to make social transformation. And that's why I said we need to think. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I believe in it. I believe in the naked protest. I just think that we also need to engage all the ways that it's complicated and that it's such a complex action that engenders both power and powerlessness. So I think it's always going to be in existence. I think people are always going to do it. And I mean, somebody like Naminata Diabete goes all over, the world, and then in Africa goes all over Africa to say, oh, there's a whole lot of, examples of this. So I think it's always going to be.
Yeah, just 1 minute, please.
Hello.
Trying to find out whether you saw, whether you've come across the book, Anatomy of Female Power.
Yes, I am.
Okay, and then what's different from what Chinwezu, said in that book?
About
The use of sex to negotiate power. What's different?
Sorry.
All negotiation through.
So if I understand what she did in her paper, I don't see it in the light of using sex as sex, to negotiate power. But she's looking at the body in the cultural sense of it. In this part of the world, women tend to use that naked body to negotiate power. For instance, if there is a war between two, communities. Most times, if they want to negotiate that this war must end, and they have gone to speak to people to end this war, maybe talk to the kings and all what this war must end. And if they don't want to end the war, you see the women going half clad. They might tie their wrappers, but the picture of their breast region gives them that power, and the men always go in covering their faces. So I think that could also be another form of negotiation. I don't see it that it is all about the sexual part of it, but I think it has to do with the once the woman removes her clothes, the men always give up in whatever they are trying to do. Even what she showed, with the picture she showed, they were covering their body. But you see that some of them, you might see the upper body not covered. And when such thing happens, there's the proper negotiation. You can't go back again. That's what I think. I don't know if I'm speaking your mind.
Okay,
Yes,
sorry, before you react, I would like you to equally react to the fact that the sexual resistance you showed us. But Dr. Les, please, your comments.
Yes, it's a comment about the costume stereotypes.
Okay.
The first part of my comment is that I do think that the standards of creative design in the Nugu, amongst the Nugu-based practitioners, is high.
So,
and that includes, and that is specifically in relation to creative designers, set, props, costume. How it's okay. So yeah. However, I think it also does depend a lot on the genre. So on some of these genres, there's not that much resources put towards such things like costumes. And the practitioners themselves, they do not see actually a great challenge or fulfillment in certain genres. So when it comes to epic and royal films, or films that for costumiers present an opportunity for creativity, they tend to get more resources and they tend to put more effort in. For a contemporary film, perhaps where the costumier wasn't even in the country where it was filmed, probably and would not see the best of what the costumiers were able to do. Whilst in other productions, even from that period of 2003, you can see probably better examples of what they're capable of. The second point I wanted to make was more general, that this series that Usiofi in London was part of, Usiofi in London, Usiofi in Cotonou, Usiofi in Brazil, it's actually a fantastic series of case studies for the topic of this panel of gender and contestations of Africanness, because they actually engage with both of those topics really in quite a vivid way and in a very different way in each film.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Hello?
Okay, you're still there. Yes, yes. Okay, you may wish to. Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. You may wish to still respond to some of the comments that's been made so far, if you have them. If you were following, you may wish to respond to some of the comments.
Hello?
Yes. The first question tried to look at the fact that ask whether you asked the designers the reason behind having one costume in the two films. That's the first question. Yes, and then Dr. Alex Board was trying to look at the fact that beyond the films that were produced in those, was trying to make a kind of an economic reasons for the designers, and then looked at the fact that in most recent years there are, improvements in costume in particularly films shot around Enugu, that's eastern part of Nigeria. And the
okay, can I come? Hello?
1 minute. So let's hear you, please, so that she can respond to it.
Yes, my point was that the best of Enugu costuming was not seen in this kind of genre.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yes. Dr. Les Board is trying to equally advance the thought that the best of Enugu costumiers, Enugu block of Nollywood, wasn't actually seen, in this type of, comedy genres. So these are comments. But the one you may wish, I think the one that is really a question is the fact that you may wish to react, whether you try to interrogate the costumiers to find reasons behind replicating these two costumes in different films. Yes, and then one other person made a comment whether it could be a way of registering identity of the character, like some social media characters do now, using one costume to. So these are issues you may wish to, react to. So you have to.
Very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The first one, the costumiers, the designers, they are different two people. If it's one costumier, fine. It would have been that, okay, this film that I costumed was so good. Let me repeat it. But two different designers in different locations, in different years. It just, I assume that this thing moved, this costume, when you costume come over like this, yes, he's really representing a drunkard. That is one corner, and that is unprofessional. Then the other question, whether is the person's content or thereabouts. Content creating is different from film production. In content creating, it is your work, is yourself, is what you want your audience to see that they will see. For instance, if I'm a content creator, Grace, so content creator, I will do whatever I like. I have an identity. But in this case, this is an actor that is being paid for a production. He is not even the producer. So you'd have no right to say, this is the way I want to be. No. I think, is there any other one?
All right, thank you so much. We'll quickly have her react. We'll quickly have Omotola react to some of the key issues raised, because Osina Chiezema is still waiting. He just started me that he wants to finish up his presentation, but we still have some time to accommodate all this. So please, ma'am, react to some of these issues raised.
I've answered his own question. I think your question is what I've not responded to. Yeah, so I'm familiar with the John Wesley's book on the anatomy of femur and all of that. And how it is different from what I am saying is that I mean, that's actually, another side on my part that I didn't mention that, and it's in fact a really good example of the kind of thing that I'm saying. So for him, it was basically that book is in fact basically like some kind of response to the idea of feminism, like why a good paragraph as well, like why do African women need feminism? Why is feminism is important for the African woman? And it was basically talking about how the African woman is powerful. The African cultures, African societies are such that the women are powerful, the women are not oppressed, the women are not, marginalized and all of that. And part of that is there's a really good quote from I have a really good quote from that. And so it mentions the idea of, like you said before, the two different kinds of power, right? The
hunger of the stomach,
and the hunger below the stomach. And the hunger below the stomach, like we know, is in fact the kind of thing that I'm referring to, withholding sex and all of that. And that is very true, right? But the point of what I am saying here today is in fact to say that when we think about the sexual politics of women, and in this case specifically African women, we should know, I think we should not think only of all the powers that women can get when they withhold sex or when they do whatever with the sexual power or their sexual agency. But we should also think about the ways that this can be, complex. And that's thinking in terms of what in fact pushes them. And I think what I'm saying here is that it is in fact a certain level of powerlessness. It is in fact a certain level of vulnerability that pushes them to resort. And women do not, women do not go to sexual, naked protests, nakedness as a first option. It is usually not a first option. It is usually something that they resort to after other things have failed. And so what I am saying is that there is a level of complexity that is usually undermined, that is usually, not so talked about when we think about the powers that women can get, the things that women can get done when they resort to naked protest. That is true. But I'm saying it's powerlessness, in fact, that leads to that kind of power. It is vulnerability, a certain, very volatile kind of vulnerability that leads to that. And that's how what I'm saying is different from what Kimwe said.
All right.
So I acknowledge what he said. I know that it is true, but I'm also saying there are ways that this, this thing that looks very basic can be complicated.
All right, thank you. Quickly before we ask for other questions, Osinachi Ezema, if you are there, please quickly round up and let's engage your paper a little bit. Are you there? Just started me off that he's available. Osinachi, if you can hear me, please quickly unmute yourself and engage. Unmute and engage your paper. All right, while we are waiting for him, I wouldn't know whether any other person has any contribution or question.
Actually, the reason why I so much enjoy a paper, and I think we are doing something very good. So I'm looking at the presentation or representation of the body and what it means. It goes beyond like what she said. It goes beyond the sexual, and it is also giving me a kind of diverse interpretation, because from what she's saying now, I can see that there is this, level of criticality for the women before they can actually come out to, or expose what is supposed to be covered. And it is trying to, give us a different understanding of how we should perceive the body and how what it can steer us to look. Because she said something about the organization, behind that kind of protest, the kind of conviction of the mass people, and in a way, it is explaining something about the change of the culture in a way, because we can see that there is no more a kind of shame, or so to speak, in portraying certain things just because of circumstances and diverse inputs that we have as a result of the confluence of culture. I mean, globally, locally, and what have you. So, thank you. First, I would like to engage you.
All right. What I think about this is that, of course, the issue of sexual objectification of the feminine folk in films, can be attributed to this issue of, the weaponization of sexuality by the women folk. I don't know whether you understand what I mean. The fact that the feminine, folk always want to use sexual power, or sexual sex to negotiate power. Don't you think it has resulted to, a couple of directors objectifying the feminine folk in their films? Maybe it's a question.
Okay, so I think we're talking about two different things. I will not talk about what I am saying in the sense of objectification of the female body. I do not think that what I am saying is objectification. What I am talking, the kinds of nakedness that and like he said, nakedness can actually be interpreted in different ways.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what you're doing or why you are doing it. So there could be, we're talking about people who you would bare their bodies in protest, but there are actually people who bare their bodies, because they are attending parties. There are people who would, open their bodies because they just want to, they just feel like, and so there are all sorts of different, things. And then what you're talking about, the directors, using the female body, and I think there's I came across a paper recently. I cannot remember who did the paper now, and this person was basically talking about, the objectification of female bodies in Nollywood movies, how directors would in fact specifically focus on, the interesting parts of the female anatomy, and it does not really look like there's a reason to it, or that they do it for a reason, maybe just to attract, the audience and all of that. So that's one thing. And that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is using the female body for a specific purpose. And I also want to, to emphasize that the kinds of protests that I'm talking about, well, the kind of protest that I mentioned earlier in the Okakoko situation, in fact, has cultural and spiritual, connotations. It is not just physical. They are not just, bearing their bodies on the physical level. In fact, if we're thinking about it as just physical, then we're missing the point of it. It is not just physical. It is also cultural. It is also spiritual. And that's where, in fact, they believe that the potency of that action comes from. That's what makes it so important. In the sense of the film that I mentioned, of course, they were, talking about the body on the level of sexual actions within certain household, within the household. But it takes on potency because it is not just one household. Now it is a group of women, different women all over a nation, thinking in terms of, withholding sex as a protest tool. So in that sense, again, that's not objectification. That's using it specifically for a purpose. That's very different from a director or somebody just using, showing the body to make money or to attract an audience or to do whatever in a film.
All right. We just have about 10 minutes to go. I wouldn't know whether there are quick questions, comments before we, yes.
Why is I didn't tell you about that. Yeah.
Okay, Atam.
Yeah.
It's like they enjoy it too. They protest a lot.
All right. Maybe
I don't know if Osi is still there. Osi, are you still there? Hello.
Hello?
I mean, Sinachi. I think what he's trying to say is what's the need for this African film or cinema, since we're all looking forward towards the global thing. We can just call it cinema or call it, fame or whatever. But I don't think that is possible for now. I don't think it's possible because it's always like the normal we and them in a situation. For instance, an Indian man will not say his film is call it a global film. He will still want to maintain his culture, his identity. This is Indian film. This is Hollywood film. This is now Nigerian film. So the idea is there are some select intricacies in some of these films that makes it unique to one person or one group and the other. If an Indian decides to shoot a film that will look like a Hollywood film, you will most times discover that there are things that he has put there, maybe either from the accent or his maybe technology application of some software that will make him generate some action which might not be normal, even when they try to do that, it's normal. When you say this, you see, this is an Indian film. What we also say here in Nigeria, or a Chinese film, they are all different hair and their costumes. So I think, for me, I think it will still be a very long way, work to achieve. Yes, sorry, Otenso.
Thank you. My name is Olafia. My question is directed to the human about question. Today I was just imagining thinking what you said objective of design, because I know when it comes to academics, the part an objective. What is this about? What is this what is this directing? What is that happening? And I think the other person has a question for you to answer. That was your methodology. So how do you engage your people who are involved in this? How do you get your answer? Or you can try to
okay.
It's already responses.
I think she should.
And I think the key word I read from what she said was assumption. What assumption? Right. And so I feel her work is more. I don't know what it comes to. I don't know. I think she respond. I'm just trying to. Came in late. I didn't come to paper, but I'm trying to make sense of what she said, what he said. So I think our work it's very assumptions. It's maybe an attempt to do a conceptual story, but then still trying to make it
scholarly.
Say work in progress. And then maybe we can just maybe that part that it's one progress. But so I wanted to just contribute to but because what you bring are very vital reports. Hi, my name is Kobe, General people. Lecture communication at Boy University, also doing my PhD at Atlantic University, and I'm studying film. I'm so hoping I keep getting for this session. Nonetheless, I wanted to respond to what you said. I was really looking forward to having about African cinema as a global concept. And it raised a very interesting conversation as regards an attempt to define African cinema. I don't know if the speaker defined African cinema. I don't know if you
Yeah. What he was trying to do is he was looking at globalization and was looking at the in the sense of homogeneity in various forms, globalization, and then was wondering whether there could be a distinct cinematic culture following globalization. So these were some of the questions he was raising before the network started.
I think I won't go into the thought process. In terms of attempting, because to be honest, I don't think we can actually have all we have are just working definitions of what we call African cinema, what we call global cinema, just working definitions. There's no one size fits all definition that can actually capture the whole essence of it. So I would say that in terms of attempting to define what African cinema is, and then by extension try to categorize it as whether it should stand alone, or it should be looked at as global cinema. There are a lot of conversations that we raise from there, that we can raise from there. And the first would be in defining whatever something is. There's something called filmmaker's intent. So if a filmmaker comes out now and says that this film I made is Hollywood, this is a Bollywood film I made. I don't know if you've seen Namaste Wahala, the combination of Hollywood. So if a filmmaker comes out and says, so there's this conversation on that film. It's actually directed by, I've forgotten her name, I don't know how to pronounce her name, not her name, but I can't pronounce it. She's Indian. Amisha, right? She's Indian. And when she's having the conversation with an Indian audience, she says that we produce a Nollywood film. When she's having the conversation here, she's saying they produced a Bollywood film, and then ends by saying that it's a collaboration. I'm going somewhere, right? I'm going somewhere. Now, what I'm trying to say is that there is the conversation of the filmmaker's intent, wherein a filmmaker decides what his film is. Now, the counter argument will now be from the audience perception, which is now we're saying that because we have seen a lot of Bollywood films, because we've seen a lot of Nollywood films, there are certain parameters that we've identified, consciously and unconsciously, to define and conclude that this film is Nollywood. And you mentioned some of them. You said costume, you said the language used, all of these things and all of that. And then if we start to box it in that, the argument now is used to say that, okay, no, you claim that this is a Bollywood film. You obviously will give your reasons why it's a Bollywood film. And she gave her reasons why it's a Nollywood film. She used Nigerian characters. They shot some scenes in Nigeria. They spoke some Nigerian local dialect. There's a Nigerianness to the film. And there's another one she did with Toby Bakre, was the lead actor, where he was a dancer. Postcard, thank you. And you can see that there's that combination. But my point is, the fact that we say, because even within Nollywood, right, itself, there's that conversation of Kannywood. They don't see themselves as Nollywood. Yoruba film production, so they don't see themselves as this different conversation. I'm doing my research on Christian film. And Christian filmmakers, some of them don't see themselves as Nollywood. They tell you that they don't do so. But in my work, I try to define that conversation and say, whether you like it or not, if we put in the filmmaker's intent, if we look at it from audience perception and all of these things, there's so many ways or so many dimensions we can look at.
Are you born again?
I will ask you those questions. But then if you say you are born again, how do I know you are born again? So the arguments are, it's just so, and that's the beauty.
And even if you are born again, based on church.
That's another conversation. No, yes. I think Bible believers not. So the conversations they are very, but I try to categorize them and say Christian films and Christian filmmakers. We can just do categorization like a framework, and that's what I just want to end by saying to this guy. What we can do is, or what we have, which will be hard for us to now look at it as a global cinema, is we would always have frameworks, categorizations. Even within the film, Christian film, I said that there are evangelical films. And that's the like of my family, focuses on the messenger. They believe that the messenger is the message. So you can't use Iniedo to act a pastor film when a viewer is watching it and he's trying to give his life to Christ. Yeah. And then he now remembers the scene when Iniedo was kissing. There's a contradiction between that. Yeah.
What if the director decides to have a list?
Yes.
And maybe you have a list. You wearing a costume.
Yeah.
As have a list and making a pastor.
No,
I'm asking a question.
That what if he does that? I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, whatever way we think about it, this framework I want to propound will help us in the classification or categorization. And I said for the filmmaker, I hope the guys so you could just pick from it. So there's the evangelical where the focus is on the messenger, not the message. Their theme is sermonic-based messages, and they make films strictly for Christians, to develop Christians. There are the other sectors who are the liberalists. These ones believe in reaching a wider audience, and they don't limit themselves to Christian actors. In fact, the evangelicals, they don't call themselves actors, they call themselves drama ministers, right? But then in this category, the liberalists are the ones that want to reach out to a larger audience, the likes of Ellen Opaku, and the likes of Laju Aaron, Pastor Emmanuel Aaron's wife, who is also doing production. And so they are open to using secular actors. Their focus is on the message, not the messenger. And then the last set are the commercialists, my Igbo brothers, who do not really care about whether Christian or not Christian. They are just about making money. So if we use this framework to try to conceptualize, the African cinema in a global stage, then it will be difficult to actually look at it as a global cinema.
Thank you so much for getting on this process. It has been an awesome, awesome contribution and story. We didn't have so much time to continue dialogue. See our full community tomorrow the 24th. So I wish you all join us. We also have many of them to soon. I pray that the weather and the network will not be lost. I'm not kind of prayer.
Okay. Thank you.